What's up, everybody? What you are about to see is the second chat I have had with somebody who has experienced homelessness. Arthur reached out to me after the previous one, and I think this was really interesting, mostly because the story is very, very different, and it just tells you quite a lot about how people slip through the cracks in all sorts of ways, and each story is unique. That sounds a bit cheesy, but it's just true. I do just want to give you a heads up, as I seem to do every single fucking stream. But there are a few technical issues, so I think there's a bit of a delay. I think my mic's slightly, ever so slightly out of sync on the video version. So there's a little bit of delay between me and Arthur. It's not too much of a problem. I also do think that another thing that caused a slight communication barrier between us was like how many American things he was referencing. And you know, I know what a GPA is. I know it's a grade point average, but also I don't necessarily know like what the different numbers mean. I don't know like what's good, what's the cutoff for certain things. So sometimes I was a little bit lost and like with place names and stuff. And I do point it out. I make a joke about it towards the beginning. But anyway, that's speaking to Americans. But anyway, so without further ado, I will let you enjoy. Welcome to Unlearning Economics. Yes, everyone can hear us. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. Welcome to Unlearning Economics. So, Arthur, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we you kind of reached out to me because I had a conversation with someone who had been homeless not too long ago, and you said you had, I guess, a similar experience, probably not the same, but you'd like to talk about it. So I guess that's really what we're here to do. And I just, you know, you told me some of your story in private chat, but I just really want to hear your story and your experience of this in the USA.
Right. Basically, my story is different from the last person because I had two parents. I had a brother and a sister. I had a support system, relatively. I had friends, you know, I was in school. And it really, started basically when in my first college. My first college was Fordham University. Fordham University being the college that Donald Trump went to initially before transferring out of. And I was studying physics. And the situation was that I was a super commuter, meaning that I had to travel to school in order to be able to take classes. And on top of that, I had to stay there in order to be able to, follow through on my courses throughout the day and then commute home. There was some real difficulty there. Also losing my friend group, losing my social connections, essentially after high school, finding new friends, all that sort of stuff. But there was also like some stuff in the background that was agitating me. Essentially, for my condition, which is bipolar disorder, specifically bipolar 1, there is an issue where people do have a tendency to stop sleeping at some point. And I had insomnia. So what that meant is that I was having difficulty getting to classes, especially the early classes and stuff. And, basically this spiraled out. I'm just going to like zoom forward because I have to like focus specifically on what I wrote down. Is that like my condition became worse and, I had to be hospitalized as a result of that. And when I was hospitalized, I had to be medicated after that. The hospitalization stays typically are 2 weeks at a time. And this has been like very specific to me. So, like, the first time that I was homeless was in 2005. And I guess you're assuming now that I must be like older. Yeah, I'm 38 years old now. But my parents discovered that on my MySpace, I wrote that I was bisexual, um, which in college, a lot of people they do this, you know.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
But because they discovered this, like I got really upset, and they didn't react well. They told me to take it down. I took it down. Cool. But the argument led to me being homeless for the first time, and I had to rely on my high school friend to house me, which was cool, except his parents weren't cool with it. So literally it was me staying at his place one night and then 2 nights on the street and then returning home. So that's homeless one. Homeless two.
Yeah.
My parents discovered that there were bed bugs in my room. This was in fall of 2009. I mean, the dates could be like a little different. I was in treatment and I had been hospitalized, I would say maybe 2 or 3 times since, between 2005 and 2009, due to medication reasons and also symptoms changing. So they discovered bed bugs in my room, and they refused to do anything about it. And I got really upset. So again, that was another like 3 days that I was just like on the streets, sleeping on. Actually, this time I was sleeping on the train.
Right.
New York City is where I'm from, so I was sleeping on the MTA. And I was sleeping on the trains, and I had to stop because I literally was approached by a police officer who told me that if he saw me again, he would arrest me. So while I was going to college commuting at this time, I was like probably at Kingsborough Community College, which that's all the way at the end of Brooklyn, near Coney Island, but it's like in Brighton Beach. And
all those place names mean nothing to me, but
yeah, well, Coney Island is where the sideshows and the carnivals and the babies in test
Right,
tubes,
yeah, okay,
like all that
okay,
sort of
okay.
stuff. All that a lot of that happened in Coney Island.
Okay.
But basically, like 3 days on the train, go home, reset. And yeah, I'm trying to like remove any like disclaimers, remove any like criticism that I have of anyone, because I'm not here to like just dump trauma. I'm here to like try to focus on the facts, which is why I got a little script here. And then the third time, I just want to add that like my friends at the time said that I wasn't really homeless because it wasn't possible for me to be living on as little money as I was, because I didn't have any money. I didn't have any student loans. I had FAFSA, which FAFSA, basically gives students some money in order to be able to afford education. But at the same time, like it's not in a timely fashion, and it's not to the amount that you need to live on, because it's supposedly designated for books and school supplies. Homeless 3, spring 2012. And basically by this point, I had gotten my associate's degree. And things were a little different. I was trying to transition from colleges. If I like scroll down a little, I can see so Kingsborough, summer 2009 was when I graduated with an associate. Summer 2009 is when I graduated with an Associates of Arts. I went to Hunter College, fall 2009 to summer 2010. And then I had to go back to Kingsborough due to a similar issue that happened at my first college, which was an academic dismissal. And when I say academic dismissal, I mean like I was doing everything possible But unfortunately, due to some conflicts with teachers and also the fact that I was taking a lot of medication as a result of my treatment of bipolar disorder, I was having trouble doing the assignments to the point where my GPA, miraculously, mind you, ended up at a 1.99999999999. And they said, you have to go to another accredited college to get your GPA up. Which is wild, mind you, because I'll move on from there. But homeless.
Wait, no, sorry. Why? Could you just explain what your feelings about that? Why that's wild?
Well, because like when I went to college the first time, I went for physics. That was my major.
Yeah.
And at my first college, I was able to study physics.
Sure.
But when I went from private education to public education, the core curriculum changed.
Yeah.
And the reason that this is important is because you have to take core curriculum before you can take major courses.
Sure.
So regardless of how good I was at doing mathematics, because I was pretty good at doing mathematics, like I did calc, pre-calc, I failed calc 2 twice, I wasn't able to go back into physics. So I basically was taking, core curriculum classes, which was psychology. I was taking creative writing. I was taking English courses. I was taking history courses, basically so that I could take physics again. The reason that this didn't make any sense is because, like, in the process, I was tanking my GPA to take courses like African literature, courses that I wasn't familiar with, but also that the teachers had conflicts with me. Something like South American history, which, I was intensely interested in. But at the same time, I found the books that talked about the Sandinistas to be extremely onerous to read. I had difficulties, and I had difficulties writing papers, but then you'd have something like Psych of Personality, where I would have a teacher who would literally deduct points for attendance. And this is an issue, because if I'm commuting 2 hours to go to your school and I end up showing late to your course, it is because I was having issues commuting, not because I was having issues during the class. Or you have something like, calculus, where I literally was getting straight 97s in the class and the teacher refused to give me an A+, which would have kept my GPA above a 2.0 at that time.
Right, okay.
Right. So I literally, by the time I fully left college, I had a 3.0. And, that would be later. But to focus more back to, the thing. So fall of 2012, no, this is Homeless 3, sorry. Spring 2012. So basically, at this point, I had been going to all these colleges, Hunter College, Kingsborough College, and I wanted to transition into Brooklyn College. And they told me if I wanted to get my GPA up in Kingsborough, I had to decide on a different major. So this is infuriating to me because, by this point, I decided creative writing was going to be the focus. Because they wouldn't let me take any physics courses, because at a community college, they don't have major courses.
Okay.
Right? So I decided on programming. And I decided also at that time, F that, because my teacher was terrible. I do not want to tank my GPA more. But at the time, I was living with my parents, as well as I was living with my current with my partner at the time, who happened to be my domestic partner, right? So that's 3 things, right? And my domestic partnership, it's sort of like a marriage without the whole ceremony. It's mainly for like finances and also for, special permissions like a healthcare proxy, which is very important because I've had periods of time when I basically had an issue, like an altered mental state, and I couldn't
Mhm.
communicate for myself. I would literally become nonverbal, which is very odd. But basically, what happened in this situation is that I entered one of those states. Like some people understand mania, some people understand depression, some people understand psychosis. This was like more on the psychosis area. And yeah, like I had to move out of my parents' place, which was in the Bronx. And my parents had to, which a year previous, they had to move from the Upper West Side to the Bronx because the building that they were living in was being renovated. So they decided to do this sort of thing, which is ridiculous. But then moving back from the Bronx to the apartment in the Upper West Side, my parents said, "Hey, your partner should be homeless. And your partner should be homeless, particularly because they can take care of themselves. And there's not enough space for them to live there, anyways." And I was infuriated by this. And I told my therapist, I told my psych, there were a lot of tears shared. And basically, there was a lot of discussion on what needed to be done. Obviously, college wasn't the thing that was going to help. So we decided to just grab all of our stuff, put it into a storage unit. And yeah, that is literally what we did. And in the process of doing this, I'm skirting a lot of details to not just for like privacy reasons, but because I'm trying to remain as neutral as possible about the decisions that were made. We took the U-Haul and we decided to park it like on the side of the road. And instead, we couldn't find parking. Someone panicked, and we decided to drive all the way to Florida, which is where their family was.
Okay.
So I'm now with my partner's family in Florida, and basically, I'm full blown like psychotic, nonverbal, unable to communicate. It's very difficult for me to like be able to do anything. So what do we do? And that's the issue, because if you're trusting other people, like we were trusting her family, we decided, hey, like, all right, you need treatment. I got into the hospital, got treatment. When I got out, I came out in the same or similar condition that I was before. But also some decisions had to be made because the situation was not tenable, for us to be living there. Not only wasn't there like enough space for us, but also we were demanded stuff that, really couldn't have been done reasonably. As well as we decided that like what we were doing in New York City, which was running a small business, buying and selling clothing, particularly vintage clothing, we had to ramp that up. And with every expectation of like getting back to New York City, we did that. Except this is where like the homelessness begins. Because like if you're relying on like family members, you start to burn out the goodwill that you had with these people. And it's not even like a matter of like, oh, you can stay here, oh, you can shower. It's more so a matter of routine. And there is also personality clash. Like, oh, I'm going to have friends over because this is my place, that sort of thing. Oh, like, you should be the one doing the dishes, even though we're the ones, doing, making most of the dishes, that sort of thing. So like, we decided, hey, like maybe we should like try to be homeless in New York City because we have all this clothes that we could possibly sell. And we did try that later, but in the meantime, we wanted to try to basically find friends here, and then find friends here in Florida, and then find a place, because basically we had income. And like the most significant development in my life up to that point was that despite not being in college, I applied for SSI, and I was able to be denied, receive the denial letter, which is massive because a lot of people don't even receive that in the mail, but then also to challenge that and to go up against the judge in court and say, hey, like, I can't even work a warehouse job. Can you please help me? Help me get away from my parents, essentially, is what I said. And they were like, yeah, we could do that. And I thought that was great. So, like, I had money now, which could be coming at any moment, right? So I was able to, get into some places to look around in Orlando. And I was able to like potentially sign a lease, and then I was able to negotiate with my parents that hey, this is something that we wanted to do. And instead, my parents pulled rank and said, hey, you're moving back. And it was at this point again that I had another altered mental state. And this was so severe because like we had already decided we were taking a bus back to New York City. And we had been staying at a hotel, and this was, again, like after like burning bridges essentially with the family and burning bridges with friends and acquaintances that we had there in Orlando to try to get this apartment, which was essentially like in a living community that was going to sort of like help us because they needed more disabled people to be living in this community. And yeah, like, so basically my partner at the time literally had to go back to New York City on their own, mind you, not having a place. And my father literally had to come pick me up from the hospital because they just did not like understand what was going on with me. They didn't believe anything that was happening. Like they even diagnosed me with dementia in that hospital.
Right.
So we're moving on.
Yeah.
Just to wipe the slate clean. I make it to New York City, right? Currently, I'm living with my parents. My parents say, hey, you should go back to college. You should forget about this girl. This girl, by the way, who is like legally tied to me at this point. And I'm just like, this is a terrible idea. So what I do is I go find her, and I also negotiate with my parents for them to get me an apartment for me to live with her. And it works out. And it works out splendid. And we're able to, get that apartment. We're able to get our stuff all in one place. And we're able to, like, basically, like restart our lives. So I go back to college. I go back to college, Brooklyn College this time, fall 2012 to spring 2014. I say creative writing this time because I already have all the prerequisites for the major. I do not have to play the game that I played when I was playing physics. And this is wild because like there was a culmination of points. Basically, like the interpersonal stuff with my parents was really bad. But my health had been pretty stable. And at the very end of my spring semester in 2014, there was like a blizzard or something. And I'm still a super commuter, mind you. Like at this time, I'm going from the Bronx all the way to Brooklyn to be able to like get, to school. And there's a lot of walking that happens, when you are a super commuter. Um, it's not just like walking from my apartment to the train station, getting on the train and arriving at college. No, there's you walk to the college as well. And in New York City, what happens is it snows. They don't clean up the snow. The snow turns to black ice. When the snow turns to black ice, it creates a slippery condition. I had a slip and fall in college. I went to the doctor. They gave me a cane. They said, take it easy. You can't take it easy like right around the time that like finals are coming, like the last month of school. So what happened is I developed a very rare condition called rhabdomyolysis, which basically like I was injured. The injury became worse. The reaction that I had to the injury, the internal mechanism, whatever, basically gave me another altered mental state. And then I end up home trying to coordinate with my partner at the time, everything that needed to be done. Like, okay, so the papers need to go to the professor, email the professor this, let them know that this is going on, talking to my doctors, all that sort of stuff. Everything was taken care of, in terms of that. But my mom, for some reason, who had trouble communicating with my partner at the time, decided, hey, you need to be in the hospital. Despite already being in the hospital, despite already like having taken the medication. So she like literally comes into my apartment while my neighbor is taking care of me and says, hey, like, do you need to go to the hospital? And at the time it was nonverbal, so there was no way I could have possibly consented. But she thought that I nodded. So the two police officers and the two EMT behind her decided to take me to the hospital and involuntarily commit me to the hospital again. So another 2 weeks down the drain, like it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. You've got a month to go till finals as well, just to remind everyone at this stage.
The last thing that I could have possibly done, like I was doing creative coexistence with, the Hillel group at Brooklyn College. That was amazing, by the way. And we did a play on the Holocaust. And it was like very sad and very fulfilling for me to be able to go to the Holocaust Museum in DC. And I have photos of myself going around with a cane and being able to see all these sites. But it reminded me like so much that like a lot of these experiences that the disabled people are having, as well as queer people are having, are very similar to, that whole thing. Because like, who are the people who are being taken advantage of the most in these situations? People who are queer or disabled. And I really do feel like, this, like the heaviness of having like completed that, like I was involved in like writing, as well as involved in like writing songs for that, and as well as like just like performing as well, like performing as a stage actor, like all of these sequences that like what I had was actually like important. And I felt like, like the path that I had taken in creative writing was the one that I wanted to like pursue, right? But this was in complete counter to what my parents wanted, because they wanted me to be a lawyer. They wanted me to be a scientist. They wanted me to be financially independent. But anytime that they tried to, like help me get to that point, they'd end up like squishing it before it happened. And that's what happened here. They squished it completely because I did end up homeless as a result of that. As a result of their decision, their dislike of my partner, their dislike of like what I was doing, like it doesn't have to be like as severe as like hatred, because I don't think my parents hate me or anything. I certainly don't like what they did, because like I had to, like, it was July 4th, the date that we were deciding, like, finally, hey, we need to get out of here. We already have a storage unit. We're already putting stuff in it. And, we got a neighbor to help, basically with the storage unit, getting stuff to the storage unit and stuff. And my parents come and they try to break into my apartment. So, like, I basically have to barricade myself with my partner on the door to prevent them from coming in, which is fucking wild. But basically, due to the slip and fall, due to the rhabdomyolysis, due to the altered mental state, I basically had to give up everything I had in New York City to be homeless again. And this time, like, this was like the real homelessness again.
You took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, I was going to say this felt bigger.
Right. So, like, like when we were homeless in Orlando, for example, we stayed with friends that, my partner knew when they were younger. And, people like change, they evolve, that sort of thing. But like what happened in that situation was that, like, for some reason their freezer had a meltdown and they blamed it on us and they kicked us out. Cool. Well, I mean, this pattern repeated itself with like a number of different people who said that they could help us. Like it could be, I'm putting disclaimers up already. So basically, like, once we didn't even know, like, if our stuff was in the storage unit, but we were like trusting that to, the neighbor. And at this point we had like a massive 1-bedroom apartment in the Bronx that we had to give up. But we stayed with friends. We were able to sleep for a few nights. We stayed with family. We were able to sleep for a few nights. But at this point, like, we had only some of our stuff and we had to decide like what we were going to do because it was too expensive to go back and forth from New York City to Florida. What we decided, because like technically the situation was that we could be homeless for part of the time if we were making enough to be able to essentially hail our way back. So that is what we decided to do. We went back and forth, Florida, New York City. And in New York City, like, when we were like buying and selling stuff, we were actually on the streets and we were like meeting up with other homeless people. Like, one of my fondest memories happens to be, besides the fact that I was like more stylish than a lot of New York City people.
Of course.
Even the ones at the clubs, is that there's two things. So one, I was called a hustler by someone on the train, just on the train platform, because they saw me like with my massive bags that I was hauling around because that was the stuff we were buying and selling. And then two, was essentially that I had built this like fort out of cardboard boxes in order to be able to sleep somewhere in downtown Manhattan. It's like one of like the pricier areas of Manhattan. And some homeless guy, some random college bro, like, came up to the boxes because he wanted to pee on them. And I just poked my head out and it scared the crap out of him. And he ran away. But yeah, like, that sort of thing is just not sustainable, like the boxes, because you're dealing with a lot of like environmental factors. It's not just like like the dirt or the grime that can be washed off. It's more so like mosquitoes, mosquito bites, not being able to shower. That's a massive thing. That's where like friends or like even acquaintances could possibly help out. Being in the homeless shelter, right?
Mm.
so like this was like more important. Like if you are a single individual, right, and you want to go into a homeless shelter, you could. That doesn't mean that you're going to get a space though, because there's usually like a massive wait to be able to get a room, and it doesn't mean that the room will be quiet. You know, uh, and
Mm.
family shelter is a similar situation because like when I ended up like wanting to go into a family shelter with my partner, like this is where it gets a lot more complicated, right? um because like they want to know if you have the paperwork necessary to prove that you actually are who you are. Like by this point, like domestic partnership wasn't enough to be able to get into a family shelter for some reason. But we did get married in like 2013, hoping that like that sort of thing would help us get a place. And um, we were able to get into a family shelter. But the first day that I was there, I put my stuff down because I was just so tired of carrying it all that my phone was stolen. And that's another thing. If your phone is
Mm.
stolen, like you're just relying on the person who has the phone to be able to get anything done. And that is awful.
Yeah.
Uh, and on top of that, like when you actually do get into the shelters, like they do take your benefits. They take your SSI. At the time,
Okay.
it took half of my SSI. So let's just say it was like $800. Now you only have $400. They took my, also like half of my SNAP. So like I only had like $100 to be able to spend on food. On top of that, they served institutional food. And on top of that, institutionalized food rather. Like I'm talking
Mm.
about like, like TV dinners, like in a tray, like that sort of thing. Not even like
Yeah.
nutritious stuff,
Yeah.
sometimes expired stuff, and not even stuff that is like kept at a good temperature. Like, like milk should be kept like cold. It would be at like room
Yeah.
temperature. Same with like juice. Same with like fruit. Fruit was just like in deplorable conditions, to be honest. Um, but the thing is that like on top of that, there was a curfew. And this is where like I draw a massive line because if you are a freelancer, like if you can make money like doing what you do, especially in times of the internet, you can't do that if there is a time limit to like what you can uh, essentially where you can essentially go, right? So the internet is a place that you can go to, right?
Mm.
If you don't have Wi-Fi, you can't work on the internet, right?
Mm.
So like the shelters didn't even have that. On top of that, you're living with other people, other uh, couples, because this is a family shelter, that may not have good relationships. You're hearing arguments happen all the time. You're hearing banging consistently, and there is no security for like anything that you have, any of your belongings. If you don't take it with you when you leave the room, which is literally what the security person told me there at the shelter, then you're not going to have it. On top of that, the wait for a social worker is very long. On top of that, when and if a social worker should meet you, there's a very complex issue um, where the social worker may not be able to like process your case as quickly as you would like. So, like, let's say you applied for New York City Housing Authority, which is NYCHA in New York City. That's where I was applying. Um, the average wait at the time that I applied for housing that was low income and affordable was like 8 years. So
Yeah.
you have to be in the homeless shelter for 8 years, you
Mm.
know? and they don't even have air conditioning. They tell you to bring a box fan. They don't have like reliable heat. They don't have like hot water. So if you wanted to take a shower, like, good luck. So like a lot of these things would have been like acceptable, especially like if you think that you can like save money by making money and be able to like sort of catapult yourself out of the situation. But that the reality is that they are not structured for you getting out of that situation. Besides the extended wait, and on top of that, like you essentially like applying yourself differently, I would say, which is why like it's uncomfortable. Let's just say like what got me out of that situation was that we were just like walking around one day and we managed to get back into the shelter, and we heard like gunshots, and apparently there was a 16-year-old riding a bicycle on the street who had just been shot like point blank. And I'm telling you that like the way that New York City is structured, these places, because I grew up in Harlem, aka Morningside Heights, but this was like East Harlem. The way that they structure these places is, okay, so we'll have a homeless shelter in a low-income area, and that like poverty does lead to crime, particularly certain types of crime. A lot of the reason for that is, drug activity and gray market activities in general. Like this is like what we were doing, like we were doing gray market activities, by buying and selling clothing. Some of it was online, and some of it was in person, and that's not something that like people, seem to think there's a problem. The problem is when you start hurting other people. And I do think that she probably got caught up in the wrong place in the wrong time. And we just felt that onto ourselves and said, hey, we need to get out of here.
Yeah.
So that leads us to the next part, which is basically like, I moved to a small town.
Can I just ask, in terms of the timeline, is this still 2012? Is that right? Are we... Wait, I think I think your mic's stopped working. Oh no, that's better.
Yeah.
That's better. Fine.
So spring 2014, basically, is like the last semester that I had in college.
Okay.
Because mind you, like I am oversimplifying to the like greatest extent. Like I did not even talk about like how the financial aid promised me that my tuition was going to be covered that semester and actually changed their mind. I did not even talk about that. There were like so many things. Like I did not even talk about like how my poetry professor called me stupid in class, and like how literally it caused a revolt in my poetry class, like just because like they all seemed to take my side over the professor. Like there's a lot of like instances of discrimination that seem to be secondary to the homelessness, basically. So that's Homeless 5, like slip and fall, rhabdo. Rhabdo leads to altered mental state. Altered mental state leads to me being essentially like removing myself from college. And then removing myself from college actually leads to me, having more issues with my parents, and my parents not taking it well actually leads to me having to be homeless. Like for real, like we were so fed up with like the people that were helping us, and not necessarily because like they weren't like helping us to the extent that they could have, but rather because like we really needed our own place. We needed our own space. We needed to be able to like shower, take care of each other, like eat food, like all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that led us to like the next string of
Mhm.
homelessness, which like we were able to get a place, and we were able to get a place for an entire year. We were able to stay there. We were able to meet our neighbors. We were able to make friends. We were able to like volunteer, at a thrift shop. We were able to like progress the business a little bit. We were able to do a whole lot of things. The thing was that we knew that that social circle that we were developing was going away. So we decided to move again, and we decided to try it again in an apartment in New York City. Again, and this is because like we did have income and we could potentially afford things, as long as we were sharing a room with someone. And we essentially lowered our standards. I still had SSI, still had food stamps, was able to uh, go to places to look at apartments in New York City, was able to try to apply to places. But here is the thing. If you do not have a cosigner, and if you do not make 40 times the monthly rent, you cannot live in New York City. Quite simply. And we
40
didn't.
times the monthly rent.
Correct.
I
Yeah.
should imagine that's quite a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, at the time for one bedroom apartment, like 1,500 was the going rate or the market rate. And you can imagine that a lot of people who actually live in New York City actually had to move further away from the center, which is Manhattan, aka New York City, um, New York. But yeah, like like we were talking to people, some real estate brokers and stuff, and seeing if we could potentially do anything, and nothing. So what we decided on was being homeless again. And like as situations are, like typically the main people who can help you are your family. My family is not in the picture. Her family is, and your friends. And we managed to convince a friend to be able to rent a place here, where I am now. And that's in Florida still.
Okay.
And this is where it gets a little like tricky, because like relationships do progress. And, I was having like issues, essentially with my partner at the time, and I started getting into bicycle accidents because I started riding bicycles everywhere. And I got into 2 bicycle accidents, and they were sufficient enough to like hurt my head enough to the point where, again, like just like everything that has happened, usually there is a physical event, biological injury of some sort that
Yeah.
leads to a mental condition, that leads to an altered mental state, that leads to hospitalizations, and it happened again. But yeah, I was able to stop that, to stop these things from progressing, because I was able to live in a space long enough to be able to see myself out of that relationship, to get divorced, and to find a person who is better for me. Um, and, like I managed to stop, my homelessness as well as my psychiatric issues by having a place, by essentially learning how to live independently. And also, that doesn't really say very much. I don't really make much money. Um,
Mm.
but I have been living since the age of like 18 on an extremely limited income.
Mm.
And while that does cause me issues, and yeah, while not having my family, makes things difficult in order to be able to afford stuff, uh, like I do get some treatment and via Medicaid. I do get some food via SNAP. I do get some money via SSI, and like that's really what I have to figure out now. Like, his that homelessness thing, like, if you really like try to like parse like everything that happened, like it's like 9 separate instances of where there would be like a homelessness, where there would be a psychiatric hospitalization, which, mind you, like, they do not like help you with like housing. They do not help you with finances, and then precipitated by like some period of instability where I can't go to college, I can't go back. Either I don't have the money, or college might not be in session, and then and then just me trying to figure everything out in the middle of everything.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, okay. So is that is it okay for me to interject, or did you have more? Because I didn't want to interrupt you too much while you were going over your story.
no, I mean, this is like the general stuff.
Yeah. I mean, just the picture of like the amount of movement that you had to do, and I think especially the early ones. I mean, like we said in this stream, I guess we're kind of interested in the system and like what's going on, and we're not assigning blame, but kind of even the really early stuff. I think like the sort of 3-day ones. I just to return to those, right, all the way back at the beginning, where you were homeless for 3 days. I mean, how do you feel that impacted like the later instances of homelessness?
So,
sorry, I was just laughing at your cat.
yeah. This is Paprika's.
Paprika. That's a good.
Yeah. So there is a fundamental difference between like the generations, I think. And it happens to be not as important for like friends, but more so in terms of families. And because like kids know it, their parents are boomers. They understand it on a fundamental level that they aren't going to change their parents' minds, right? But the thing is that my parents were immigrants who became naturalized citizens when they became indoctrinated into this system, this particular system of capitalism. They assimilated to the extent where they took on Christian values. And I would say that this is the problem, because they weren't exactly Christian. Like they may have believed stuff. They may have like, read the Bible and stuff. They may even have gone to church from time to time, but they certainly didn't seem to like have that sort of like coherent narrative that a religion would have. Right. And if you can't challenge that, then you end up in situations like this. This is why, like, even like throughout history, you'll see that like anyone who deviates from the norm, particularly when their parents want them to conform, they end up having a lot of issues. Like, I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to, play with other people. I wanted to be in a band. I wanted to record songs. I wanted to do all of those stuff. And I was able to, but only because I was defying my parents.
Yeah.
So like my parents' idea of like socializing is like being at home with each other. My idea of socializing is being out there with other people, just hanging out with them, doing whatever they're doing, So there's like a fundamental difference between like older generations and younger generations. We do different things. But then on top of that, like, because there isn't that room for exploration, because there isn't that understanding, let's just say, when I was going to college, for example, my parents were like, all right, you're going to pay rent. And I was like, well, if I wanted to do that, why didn't I just like board at the actual colleges that I was going to? And they're like, oh, it's too expensive. We can't afford it. So like you end up in these conversations, which are ridiculous, or even in terms of like disability, right? So I've been disabled since the age of 18, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the catch-22. For SSI, you have to have a disabling condition, right? But you can work. For SSDI, you can't work, particularly because you have the disability, but also because you're disabled, you can't work.
Mm.
So I'm already disabled since the age of 18. So shouldn't I be receiving SSDI?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting what you said about this kind of cost, or maybe we shouldn't call it a cost. That's too anodyne. Maybe we should call it a punishment for deviating from the norm, because you're obviously getting that on a personal level, right? From your
Right.
parents mostly, but you're also getting it on that systemic level. It almost seems like those programs are designed to punish you as well, right? And so you're just that's just how it becomes absolutely impossible for you to get a foothold unless you completely conform to the extent that you could, and just do what you're told on various fronts.
Right. So here's the thing, right? So like SSDI says that you need to, it's based on your work history, right? And I asked them on the phone, hey, like I was only able to work for short periods of time. I was only able to report income for short periods of time. I've had some jobs, that reported to Social Security. Um, why is it that I'm not receiving it, even though like I'm disabled? And they're like, oh, well, it's the work history requirement that you need to like go through. And on top of that, like it gets even more complicated because I found out like recently that if you are on SSDI, your Medicaid switches to Medicare. And Medicare is like what old people have. Medicaid is what, typically younger people or low income people have. And then I would have to start paying for medications. And then I was just like, well, I'm going to be on the medications anyways. I would just have trouble affording the medications. And I found out on top of everything else that Medicare actually doesn't like cover everything. Kind of like Medicaid does. Medicaid, like you go to a doctor, you have no copay. You pick up your medication, you have no copay. Like you're literally not paying for this stuff, and they're just like handing it to you. And I find myself like in between those things in a very specific way. It's very similar, like with my parents. Because like a lot of what precipitated these situations is because like I wasn't allowed to live like other people my age were allowed to live. Like, okay, so you want to move out, you get a job, and you live with a bunch of other people, right? That's the most affordable way. But I also wasn't allowed simple things like to cook, because my mom thought that because I was on the computer all the time that I was going to like burn down the house, and here I am cooking every day.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It is very much like Catch-22, the novel. And I do feel like, even explaining all of this stuff, I do feel like Vonnegut, like unstuck in time, like having to like go back and forth.
I wanted to ask you maybe a little bit more about these programs, because you did also mention that in when we were talking, right? So just I mean, I don't. I guess I realised how little I know about these programs. Being from the UK, but I expect a lot of people in the US don't know that much either. So, just like some of the different types of programs, and you've spoken about Medicare and Medicaid, right? And you've spoken about SSI, but also things like food stamps and like, I mean, when you're somebody who is in need of, in principle, any number of these programs, right? I mean, what's your experience? How does that work?
So basically, there are systems, social safety nets held up by duct tape. And this is why a lot of people don't like them, even when they do participate in them. So basically, if you were to, let's say you lost your job, and you had to apply for benefits. When you apply for benefits, you have to report like what your wages are, as well as, report a number of things. It's like an entire like list of questions that you have to answer. And then there is a determination that is made initially it has partly to do with your income, but also the questions that you've answered. But also there's going to be a review done by like an employee of the government. And this is where it gets convoluted because their system relies on the mail. So if you don't get the letter in the mail, you are still liable for whatever the decision is. That means if you don't get benefits and you don't know about it, you have to apply again. If you do get benefits and they ask follow-up questions and you don't receive the follow-up questions, you could lose it. And on top of that, like you have to apply for it like every year, or particularly food stamps. You have to apply for it every year so that your renewal doesn't lapse. And this is infuriating because like for someone like me who is like considered disabled by the government and is receiving like SSI, I should have it automatically and not have to renew it, But on top of that, I have to renew every year, and I have to constantly check their website to see if the things that they are sending in the mail are actually coming, which this is all ridiculous. But the benefits that are given, like I know some states, like New York, actually has an additional amount that they add, just due to blue states being better at like giving money to these programs. But here in Florida, like I just get the base amount and the base max amount allowed, which is kind of confusing because like I'm able to get food put onto a card, and that or money put onto a card that I can only spend for food, right? And when I get that card, well, I have the card automatically. You only need to get the card like once or when it breaks. And you're able to go to stores and be able to buy food. However, not every place has food. They call it EBT, electronic benefit transfer. Not every place has the system to be able to process EBT payments. And on top of that, like not every food item is allowed to be purchased with EBT. So it gets even more complicated. You're constantly in the situation where, okay, so you can buy like snacks, because they're easy. But most of the time you're going to have to be buying like food from like bulk food or like food that you can make at home. This is why like it accounts for the fact that you're living in an atomic family system, right?
Yeah.
Where you have a home and you have a place to cook and you have a partner who could possibly help you, that sort of thing. But on top of that, like it just doesn't account for the fact that people prefer hot food. That's a benefit that is only given to SNAP people if there is an emergency. Like if there's like a hurricane and like the electrical grid is messed up for a few days. Oh, looks like you can buy hot food. But it turns out otherwise you can only buy cold food. And it causes a lot of confusion and a lot of antagonism, particularly class antagonism, wherever you go. Because like if you are like working when you're getting food stamps, you can only get a certain amount of food, which is ridiculous, right? So let's say you applied for benefits. The normal amount is like something like $250 or something that you could put towards food. If you're working a job and you report that you're getting wages from your job, they could cut your benefits to like $50 in a month. And that means that you will be struggling to find food. Or you have to
$50 a month.
Yeah.
Now in 2025.
Yeah, if you're working.
That's like I don't know. That's just not. That's nothing, is it? You can't buy anything with that.
Well, you
can't buy an egg. You probably can't buy an egg now with that.
Exactly. But yeah, like for me, like because I'm not working and I am disabled, $250. That's cool.
Yeah.
Like so. This is why it's similar with like SSI, for example. So Social Security Supplemental Income is what it stands for. Social Security Supplemental Income is supposed to be designated towards like rent, food, clothing, that sort of thing, right? With the cost of living adjustments, like it comes out for me like around like $900, right? At least now. But like most of the places right now in my area are $1,500 a month rent. So you have to ask yourself, like, is it honest that people are paying a certain portion towards rent? To be paying them so little of their rent. Because when I lived in another place in Florida, that place that I lived in for a year, my rent was like $725, and my Social Security supplemental income was $700. So that was exceeding 100%. But like, yeah, like if I didn't have the specific structure of support that I have now, like I would not be able to afford where I'm living, is the point. And if I should try to make money, there's a specific limit that I can make, which that amount has gone up significantly. But again, I haven't had a job in a long time. But if I were to make, I think like $1,600 a month, which I don't even know if it's doable for someone who is disabled, they would start cutting my Social Security supplemental income. And then on top of that, they would, so basically I would only be getting a portion of that, like $900, and not be able to afford other things. Because obviously, like if you get a job, you have to start paying for transportation. You have to like start buying food, like lunch, different places, restaurants, that sort of thing, as well as paying for gas. I don't even have a car. I'm literally bicycling around everywhere. So like that's another thing that like makes things difficult, because like I just don't know how to explain all of this to someone who actually like is able to purchase stuff, like, hey.
Yeah. So you've got, I mean, for the first time since you were a kid, it seems like you have some level of security, and some access to resources, but there's absolutely no flexibility. There's no freedom. And it probably just feels quite precarious anyway, given everything you've gone through, right?
Right. So like I am able to like participate in gray market activities.
Sure.
This is like what I repeat to people because they don't understand what it's like to be like a freelancer. They don't understand what it is like to just like get random gigs. But this is like what I've been relying on. Like if I need money, like I used to tell people, I would just go onto the street and play guitar, make some
Yeah.
money. And that seemed to work out great for me, back then, before COVID. And that's
Yes.
why
Okay. Of course.
it's difficult to like transition back into like what it is that needs to be done, particularly because like like the decisions being made by the government right now could determine where I end up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about this, and I guess I was going to say because when you said you live in Florida, I'm quite aware of the political situation in Florida. But now I suppose the political situation in Florida is just kind of the political situation in the USA. So, what? Obviously, they've targeted US. They've started by targeting USAID, which is more international, but clearly that's not where they'll stop. They've also targeted the EPA and the Department of Education. But I mean, how do you feel about this, and what do you know about the direction this is going? Do you think that the benefits that you're on are very, very likely to be targeted as well?
Yeah, they already are. They already are.
Yeah.
Like even though Trump has said that he's not going to do anything, it's already like in writing. Like it may not even have passed. It may be going to pass, because this is the way bills work. But definitely Medicaid is going to be cut. SNAP is going to be cut. SNAP, EBT, food stamps, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be cut. On top of that, Social Security is going to be cut. Social Security, disability is going to be cut. Like all these things are on the table. And what it's the leopards eating their face essentially. So like like a lot of Trump supporters actually happen to be like older, and they happen to be relying on these systems. I just think it's ridiculous that like some of them actually still support him despite like all of these things that are going on. So like I am in an exceptionally precarious position, like not only was I being targeted by DeSantis before, due to like the decisions that he's been making, in the last few years. But yeah, my parents were immigrants.
Yeah.
They became naturalized citizens. This is someone that Trump said was going to deport.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I find it ridiculous because like it's not like my parents didn't plan for like this. Like that's the worst thing. It's the absolute worst thing. My dad, when he retires, he's retired, said he was going to buy a house in the DR and move back. Where do you think I'm going to be deported to?
My God, it's just but it's everything, right? It's like it's one thing on top of another. Your status as like a second generation immigrant, as well as like disability and queerness and all of this, and it's just like if it's not one, it's something else that you're being targeted for, right? So it's just so difficult to escape, if not impossible.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of why like I decided to reach out because like the thing is that like I know people have a lot of complex like stories and a lot of different things, but when you have the perspective of people that are literally experiencing inequality at the moment, you can sort of get a gauge of where to go from there. Sort of like when we listen to the news and, Trump is making his proud declarations, there are a lot of people that are pushing back against that. You know, there's protests happening here in the place where I live, and I'm very proud that they're actually going out and doing things about that. But the thing is that like there's always going to be pushback, and there's always going to be, um, a different perspective to understand. So sort of like narrowing the scope of that, you can sort of understand that like, hey, it's not just that people are making bad decisions. It's not just that people are pushing back, but there's also people like literally trying to decide what to do next.
Mm.
um, and that's the nuanced space that I enjoy, in liberal or leftist content, and particularly why I hated watching the news, like even with my dad, and here I am like watching the news all the time.
Mm. Yeah, no, I'm glad you reached out, and you just said about making bad decisions. I mean, it's so ridiculous, and we know it's ridiculous, but it listening to your story, to summarize that as making bad decisions. Do you know what I mean? Like that, it just absolutely defies credulity. It's that you made a series of decisions that you basically had to. I mean, you would. There wasn't even much choice. There wasn't much of a decision, right? It was completely forced on you by various things. So
Well, I
it's
mean,
just utterly ridiculous to blame you or anyone like you.
I mean, I did make decisions,
Sure.
that I didn't include in the story,
Okay.
and part of the reason I didn't include them is because like so much of the time that I was spent like just either nonverbal, non-communicative, altered mental state, all this sorts of stuff. Like I don't want to give people advice on like what to do in these situations. I want them to understand that like like there were decisions made by other people that protected me. Because like
Mm.
I do need protection for myself as well.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so difficult, because like if I am manic, if I have gone like a number of nights without sleep and my thinking is suddenly like disrupted, I need someone to tell me, hey, your thinking is disrupted, or hey, you need to slow down, you need to get some sleep, that sort of thing.
Hmm. Uh-oh. Oh. Um, I no, the whole thing's oh fuck. Oh,
Yeah, I think we got
okay,
disconnected.
that was a long freeze. That was a long freeze, but I do actually think that everything is still running. So yeah. Sorry. Please carry on. You were talking about needing help from partners and stuff to when you were unable to make decisions because you're in a certain mental state.
Right, right. So I mean, like I just want to highlight that even if you can't make decisions for yourself, and it's clear that I made a lot of decisions for myself, and a lot
Mm.
of bad decisions too. But if you can't, if you don't have the support of your own family, it's okay to rely on friends and other people's family as well, to sort of get through whatever it is that you're going through. Yeah, so this should be the takeaway, really, that like not everyone has struggles like me, and not everyone is me. Like I know that, but if someone is legitimately homeless, and they need help, yes, you can
Mm.
help them, but just don't expect their situation to improve as a result of you helping them. It
Yeah.
takes a massive series of events going in that person's favor to be able to get out of the situation that they're in, you know? For people who, have properties, like believing that someone who doesn't have as much money can pay rent might be the thing to do, because that happened to me in my situation. And that landlord actually happened to love me so much that he begged me to stay. But
Wow.
we couldn't. But like that sort of thing. Like if someone needs to take a shower, providing that opportunity is great. If someone needs food, you should probably give them food, but don't do it here in Florida because that's illegal.
Bloody hell.
Like, and if someone has like issues with their family, like just stop telling them to go back and talk to their family. Like sometimes like going back and talking to your family can be like worse for you, not just in terms of your like mental health, but also like in a lot of other ways that are more subtle. Because like something I didn't touch on, because I don't want to get too personal, it's like domestic violence. But like capital punishment was a thing for like boomers, like it in my personal experience, like getting slapped with a ruler, that was something that may or may not have happened, growing up. And that may or may not have been my parents. So
Right. Okay. Yeah. We can neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah, but I hope this helps. I'm doing my best to like sort of like keep everything together.
No, please. I mean, thank you. Like, it really does help. It really does. I just think, it's just so valuable to like have your story and like also, how you interacted with all of these institutions. I mean, the thing is, my thought is it's that everything is magnified, right? And this relates, or everything compounds, right? So each individual thing is magnified. Because when you spoke about two things to do with health. One was COVID, and the other was just slipping on the black ice, right? And both of those things were, of course, very horrible in their own right. And if I slipped on black ice, I might have to walk with a stick. But just the fact that compounded so much for you and just led to the breakdown of a whole load of other things. Partly it was because you had to commute so far in the first place, which you obviously still had to do. And then you had your finals, and there's a chance also that you were being discriminated against, I think, by the teachers as well, who wouldn't like lend you a helping hand. It's just all of these things, eventually it just becomes too much and you just slip below some kind of threshold, right? And that's where you're homeless, not for just for sorry, trying to make a serious point here. Not just for a few days, but for for the long term. So does that feel right to you? Does that feel like a sort of it's true?
Yeah.
Everything's true, or
yeah, because like the thing is, depression, for example, it's one of the most serious like conditions that you could have, like clinical depression, particularly because the risk is so high to you yourself for being able to recover before like the thing takes you away. And it might seem ridiculous to say that, but a lot of people, like myself, who were clinically depressed at one point, just didn't seem to think that anything was possible, including like getting out of bed, including like going to school, including getting a degree. I didn't think any of that stuff was possible. And just to see like every time that I would get closer and closer to graduating with a bachelor's degree, to see myself constantly get sick and have it all taken away, that is exceptionally demoralizing. And not just like on a personal level, like I mean like the people around me were demoralized as a result of the actions that were being taken. And I've seen this like not just in one context. I've seen it like in academia. I've seen it in the psych hospital stays that I've had. People were vouching for me, saying that like I was the sanest person there. Particularly because like I would explain to them how things worked, and like what they needed to do to get out. And apparently, like that was like frowned upon. Um, but I've seen it, in community spaces that I've been in, you know, and even like the idea that I could do the things that are in my head, like being a good musician or a good performer, whatever. When I hear that expressed, from the outside, when like strangers come up to me and say you're really good, or like I get a YouTube comment or something like that, saying how this like impacted someone's life, it feels very unreal. It feels very reflective of the post-truth moment that we're living in.
Wait, it feels unreal. It feels unreal to you when you get complimented.
Yeah, yeah, because like there's a promise there, right? That like I'm going to continue doing the things that I'm going to be doing to uh, uh, I just feel like I should have been dead a number of times, like dead on the streets, because there were times where I would be walking with like a bunch of my belongings,
Yeah.
and like really hot temperatures, and either feeling like collapse or having to like take care of my partner who literally was collapsing, you know.
Yeah.
There were times where I was sleeping in the street and trying to fall asleep knowing that there were other people around me that could potentially take stuff from me, like uh that's the type of trauma that just doesn't go away.
Mm.
So like unless like it is that I'm in this new environment, which still has yet to be constructed, where I'm perfectly protected from the
Yeah.
environment and the political struggles that I have to deal with, including the discrimination that I'm facing. Like this utopia, may not even exist, but coming closer to that idea, which is something that I have had a number of times before, like watching it go away. That's
You can't quite believe it, right? I guess, and it's so weird to me, I suppose, because it seems so. I mean, look, getting complimented for your work is great, right? Everybody enjoys it. I wouldn't say it's mundane, but it is something that happens, right? And so, not to be able to believe it as a kind of long-term scar of this experience is just, well, it's another thing that I just never thought of.
yeah. I mean, I think like a lot of musicians experience a similar thing like that. Um, uh, it's just it's more particular and more personal because I live more like in a cerebral space. Like a lot of times, I think a lot of people do when they're on the internet. They're like listening to something. It could be passive, could be active, but like they're not like literally engaging with things until they actually leave a comment. And
Yeah,
very often, like I even though like I've been
yeah.
watching you like since like before you like reveals your face, um,
Uh,
it's really ridiculous to think that like I don't really know anything about economics.
mm,
I'm watching you to learn.
yeah,
I
yeah.
could give you my perspective, but like that doesn't mean that you're going to reply to it, and you know that's more so where it's at. Like I would rather like get a compliment that legitimately like furthered my career instead of like having to remain in this like deadlock where like I actually have a career.
I do want to say, because people are asking in chat, and I don't want to do this in a really horrible streamery way, but you might want to. Do you just want to like talk about your YouTube channel? Maybe just tell people its name, because you do have music on YouTube as well, right? So in on that note,
Yeah. So my name is Arthur Madrano.
yeah.
I'm on YouTube. Blueberry Season is the name of my band. And what I've been doing recently is taking all of my recordings that I've done, some of which from 2005-ish to like about now, and putting them onto my YouTube, mixing them, mastering them, doing some basic engineering to the best of my ability, so that I could show people like my creative resume, show people that I've written songs, that I am decent at singing and writing lyrics, and like maybe I'll put on some poetry.
Mm-hmm. Nightbot should have been linking the channel throughout this in chat, and also it's in the description, I think, as well. But yeah, are you still doing busking as well? As you said that COVID kind of did that end that, or have you gone back to it?
I mean, but nothing really shut down here in Florida. But the terror was still real.
Right. Yeah.
I did go out a few times. What I'm currently struggling with and why it's so difficult is I need someone else to like perform alongside me. That way, when the guy comes to harass me or to, sexually assault me or intimidate me, or, someone comes to try to take my money, I could not have to deal with that. But there's also been like a lot of changes in my city where wealthier NIMBYs have moved in and like put up hotels downtown. So it's been difficult, particularly because these spaces used to be like sound neutral, where there would just be like the sound of the road. But now everyone keeps their windows open to like pay less rent, and there's like music blaring from like everywhere. So like those two issues will probably help me busk more if I can resolve those. But I haven't been able to on my own. But I did busk in New York City on the MTA, and I played the Busker Ball, which is still going on if you want to check it out and you are in New York City.
Okay, cool. Yeah, New York's a bit more friendly than it's Orlando, right? I mean, I've been to Orlando and it doesn't seem that friendly to something like busking. Even when I went, which was a long time ago, it sounds like it's got worse.
I mean, I think Orlando's got like a medallion system of some sort, from what I understand, where you can only play in certain spaces. So like, while I'm not experiencing like, I've never really experienced trouble with police here. When I was busking, what I do experience more of is a lot of drunk people, and I have to like muster up the will to deal with that.
So is it interesting? Do you have like friends or acquaintances or colleagues even who busk, and is that like a common experience, like being sort of just harassed or even abused? Is that like, does that make it really difficult?
Yeah. Because in New York City, for example, the police will come if you'll be playing on the subway platform, and they'll say, "Hey, you can't play here. It's this is a private property, right?" And if they arrest you, you can sue the city, and you will win and get a settlement for $30,000. The reason is particularly because, like, the police, they don't seem to understand the law, but they're there to enforce the law. And what they think the law is that you need a banner to perform in the subways of New York City. This is categorically untrue. It is your First Amendment right to perform in the subways of New York City. It's just that a lot of people, especially if they're not acquainted with you, will think you're just practicing and then like yell at you.
All right. Wow. We actually didn't really talk that much about the police. I have to say, you mentioned the police a couple of times, but we didn't talk that much about them, and your interactions with them and how that's affected things. So I don't know if that's something that you need to elaborate on, or.
Well, I mean, look at me. Just look at me. Do I appear white? Because that's the real question. Is that like, most of the time, I haven't really had issues with the police. Yes, yes. There have been times when the police have taken me to the psych hospital, but usually that's because they were called. It's not because like I've
Right.
really done anything wrong. Like I haven't like gone to prison. I went to jail once because a busker uh, assaulted me. But like I was held there for like 3 hours before being let go and the charges being dropped. That's a good story.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a positive story. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess it's yeah, I guess that's I don't even know how to frame that, but I just I don't want to say like, oh, that's a nice note to end on because that's stupid. But it's like I guess your experience with the police wasn't quite as bad as the experience with other institutions then. Yeah.
No, no, no. Like the main thing. All right, all right. So here's the last thing, right?
Okay.
Um, so I just want to like point out like the most recent example of discrimination that I faced, and it happens to be corporate discrimination
Okay.
against like me, like because I brought my backpack into a store, the backpack that I use to carry stuff,
Yeah.
groceries, whatever, and I was shouted out of the store by 4 employees of this station. And here is the thing. I decided to take the receipt, like of the purchase, go home, write up a full report, and then send it to corporate. And they responded and they were like, oh, so sorry that this happened. Next time I was there, they were all fired.
What? That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it legitimately was discrimination. But at the same time, like, uh, I don't know if you know, like, gas station culture in like Florida,
I
particularly.
don't know. I don't. You'll have to explain it to me.
Oh, people are just bored, and they typically want stuff to do, and sometimes they fuck with you. But in this situation, it
Yeah.
got a little out of hand, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like, think about it. If I'm riding my bicycle everywhere, typically I'm going to be having my backpack, my guitar, or something else, some sort of bag. Uh, I'm aware that I can knock stuff over with my guitar, but if I'm carrying my backpack, typically it's because I want to carry my groceries home. I love riding my bicycle. I love
Hmm.
like getting groceries and like being able to like do the whole Tetris to put everything in the bags and stuff. I want you to know that like there are people like me who,
Mm.
despite everything, holding us back, I'm still able to live a somewhat decent life.
Hmm.
I may not be able to, like buy everything or support the causes that I want to, financially. Uh, but at the very least, I'm watching, I'm learning economics.
That's and that yeah, and that is the most important thing, of course. I was actually going to say at the very least you have a really nice cat.
Thank you. That's Paprika. I have
Paprika,
another,
yes.
yeah, another cat too. Yeah.
Oh, they haven't appeared, sadly, but yeah, Paprika seems very, very cute.
Yeah, I'd have to call him over.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's okay. Don't have to get him. He's appeared quite a few times. No, but I mean, look, thank you. Yeah, despite literally everything you've been through, which is a lot, it's a lot to process, right? And there's so many ups and downs, and there's so many different dimensions of it as well. Yeah, is good to know that you have a relatively optimistic and positive outlook on things.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know my situation is exceptionally specific, uh, But I do know that, like, you know, like there are different points that a lot of people will relate to.
Oh yeah, I mean it's and I think, but we've all probably experienced like one or two of those things at different times, right? But then I think it's when you're like, no, this is all happening at the same time, repeatedly, you know, and that's how these things go wrong. I mean, and to you know, to your point about it being exceptionally specific, I mean, this is one of the things that I'm learning, I guess, because I spoke to Diamond a few weeks ago, which is why you contacted me, right? And you know, his situation was very different. Actually, he was in foster care as a kid, and then when he was homeless, he was actually at one shelter for a very long period of time, right? And so that's kind of obviously very different, but then that's the point, really, isn't it? That there's not just like one form of homelessness or poverty or discrimination, right? It is all literally different, and I'm sure a lot of other people have very distinct stories too.
Yeah, here's the pull quote. Homelessness is not a monolith.
Exactly. Yes, that's good. That's good. That's in fact, that is perfect. It is not. No. No, it's just so complicated and much more complicated than I really think I could have understood, to be honest, like even a few weeks ago. Yeah, so I've learned so much about this already, and I do hope that more people contact me. I know that there's someone in chat, Longshot Links, who actually has who I might speak to soon about this. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it wouldn't have been possible without, you know, me just scrolling YouTube at like 5 a.m.
Yeah. That's what it's all about.
Thank the algorithm gods.
Yeah, it's all thanks to the algorithm. Scroll more, guys. That's the solution. Arthur, so I'm gonna end the stream, but thanks so much for joining, everybody. Chat was eventually fine, although at one point I wanted to tear my own eyes out because I don't even know what the fuck you guys were talking about. But anyway, now you're fine. So thanks for joining to most of you, and thanks again to you, Arthur.
All right.
And
thank you.
Check out Arthur's YouTube channel and his music as well.
Blueberryseason.bandcamp.com.
Yeah, blueberryseason.bandcamp.com. See you later.